Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and today I'm hanging out with Paddy Finn from Penny Dragon Games. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks very much yourself.
Good. So, if you kind of want to just give us the elevator pitch of who you are and kind of what you guys do.
Yeah, I'm Paddy Finn, CEO at Penny Dragon Games, and basically we create content for primarily right now Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and we are the creators of the Mag of Holding, which we recently put out, and currently have a Kickstarter that features several books, but the primary one is Eisendore's Vault of Tragic Treasure, which is 300-page book with over 300 magic items with a twist. So it's not just like your and just another book or list of magic items. It's got like a lot of lore behind it.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of adventures in the middle of the book, so you can see figure out ways to introduce these to people, or tie the lore in somehow in your own campaigns, or just run them as they are. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're
I'm not
currently
gonna
doing.
lie. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, this is bad timing," because another company had just did a really big Kickstarter for a book of magic items. But
Yeah,
when I started looking a little bit deeper, it's a different product. Like you said, there's these magic. It's a book of magic items, but it's also like here's the adventures to get those magic items. Here's magic items, but they're also magic items kind of with a twist.
yeah.
So are they all kind of like monkey paw ish?
What do you mean?
Um, like where like it has a beneficial thing, but there's also a bad thing.
Not all of them, because we wanted an element of that. So
Yeah,
yeah, there is a level of monkey polish for sure. One example would be like the Bell of Requiem. So essentially, it's for lower level parties who probably don't have a cleric, because there's not always an occasion where someone wants to play a cleric, or maybe the cleric doesn't have the spells that they need to revive someone. So you can use this thing, but it's like it could revive your buddy or it could send you to hell,
yeah.
which is really extreme. And some of these are a bit game breaking by design. More of them are Some of them are more balanced. But most of the items are tragic in that they have just a tragic story or history, or they were created under tragic circumstances, or the lore ties in more, because we didn't want it to just be all these items that could do horrible things to players.
Right, right.
But at the same time, we wanted some of that because it can be fun, and some of those things that sort of might be game breaking can lead to really epic storytelling moments, and that was like the fundamental thing we tried to use to guide us in this, was how do we help people add to the storytelling element of their game.
And they all come with like pieces of lore.
um Not every single one of them, so every page will have a piece of lore.
Okay.
And we have a fantastic writer, Nicola Thompson. She has done all the lore for us, and every page has like a little snippet, kind of like from just someone's letter they wrote to someone else because they had this interaction with this item, or they saw someone do
Yeah.
this weird thing, and it turns out it was this bracelet they were wearing or their cloak or something. But the first chapter is all about lore, and it's about Eisendor. Where do these items come from? The vault itself. The vault is like a floating island, and well, it's a vault inside a floating island that was sort of like torn from this kingdom a long time ago in this specific setting, leaving behind a huge lake. And throughout the ages, it's just floated between different planes. So we have also added an element where you can fit it into other campaigns and settings. And yeah, it's the idea is it's been floating there, in the weather systems this whole time, and people just don't know it's there, even though it's like right above their noses.
I I always dig like those pieces of lore that you can kind of interject into your game, and the trick is making it kind of like unique but also generic enough where you can put it into any game. Um, and that's always the trick. So, how much of this stuff is coming from your own games?
Um, a good chunk of it. It's hard to put a number on, but um, so one of the examples of something that came from actually the second book we have, which is the Order of Elemental Chaos, it came from an accident, I suppose, or not quite an accident, but I put this thing in one of my games called the Bottle of Gin,
Uh-huh.
and that was spelled Djinn, and one of my players, Larian, the bard, went off on a bit of a side quest. He wanted to take a dip into becoming a druid. So he found some druidic people, and they told him how to do it. And he had to go hunting for this kind of like really old druid who would impart a blessing to him, and give him that +1 wisdom he needed to make it work. And what it came to this really solemn moment where the party reached this forest glade with a hut, and the party waited outside, and he went in to sort of like talk to this lady, and she asked him to pass her bottle of gin, and of course, thinking it was a normal bottle of gin, gin, he kind of like unstoppered it and took a little sip before giving it to her. But of course, he vanished in a flash.
Oh no.
And it was one of those moments. It was like I couldn't have planned that, and I'm really glad it happened. And then the rest of the party are like, "Where did Lurian go?" And then they all had to go and rescue him from the elemental plane of air. So that kind of I didn't expect it to happen so suddenly. It was like one of those things I was trying to foreshadow, and then I had to like make up a lot of it on the spot, and then later on refine it and balance it and things like that. But yeah, that's just a lot of that came out of the game. All of the elemental stuff, it's like I've run my party through it. So, well, most of it. By the time we publish it, it'll have been playtested by them and several other people. And yeah, some of the items have come from some of the games that we've had as well. But that's probably the most memorable one.
Yeah. So during the end times, how often do you find yourself gaming? More or less, or the same?
Oh, I spent up until the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I had to like send a message to people and say, guys, I think I'm gonna have to step back a little bit here. But I was running 3 games a week. Um, two through Lost Mine of Phandelver and one in Rime of the Frost Maiden, and a bunch of other playtest stuff, just ad hoc and a bunch of one shots. So
Yeah.
it was a whole year of just craziness. But it, I found that maybe around about this time last year, people were reaching out to me and they were saying, I think it was just because of the world being turned upside down and people wanting to have that social interaction with people, and they were like, Paddy, do you mind running a game for us? And it was people who had never played D&D before, mainly author friends,
Yeah.
and we're still playing today, even though we're on a bit of a hiatus with the Kickstarter. But yeah, it's been a wild ride.
It's hard to turn down those new players.
It really is. You want to encourage people,
Yeah.
and that's part of what we're all about. Trying to get D&D, our tabletop RPG games, and in general, to try to maybe open it up to more people and sort of lower those barriers a little bit. And I guess the internet's been great because it's helped do that, especially in, like you say, the apocalypse that we're
Yeah.
currently
Yeah.
going through.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most D&D players, most RPG players are like, they try and prophetize, the good word of Gygax to as many people as they can. Unlike other hobbies, like you never see someone trying to convince other people to collect stamps or coins.
That's
But
true.
or like, you want to play some D&D? Or if they even mention a little bit, the next thing they know, they'll be rolling up a character.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely been one of those things that's probably pushed a lot of people into it who've maybe had it in the back of their minds for a while or whatever. Um, and one of the guys in one of my groups, he's the only person who's had some experience. He just went and found a bunch of random people
Yeah.
that he knew, and he's like, let's play D&D, and they were all like, okay, we'll give it a shot. Man, they were kind of on the fence about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then a few weeks in, they're like, what do we play? What do we play?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 6 weeks later, they're all showing up in their cloaks and pointy hats.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. Like, I just recently, I think yesterday, this guest was telling me like they had gotten into it with like friends, and they're already like tabletopping, and like playing tabletop games, and then they kind of had to like so they were curious about playing D&D, so they kind of had to like convince them, but like their friends didn't want anyone to know that that's what they were doing. So,
Yeah, I could sort of. Yeah, I could. One of our players, it's like, um, I don't know, somewhat. They went to work and their boss mentioned the word role play,
yeah,
and they caught themselves and they were like, "Oh yeah, isn't that's that thing you do with dice, isn't it?"
yeah, yeah. Well, it
So,
could have been worse. They could have said something else. So.
yeah, this is true.
um, yeah, I mean, I feel like too. It's just like things shows like Big Bang Theory and Stranger Things,
Mm,
and then the popularity of Critical Role, and
yeah,
just
yeah,
like I think there's like a huge population of people that are playing or not playing the game, but like watching it. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think so, and I think I don't know. I have this theory where people, because there's so much content for people to consume on Netflix and Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and all those other, there's the amount. It's like the channels have become so prolific in creating their content, and people binge everything. But it's almost like that's consumption, whereas people, it's almost like they're looking for more of an experience over something they can just consume. And I think Dungeons and Dragons offers that experience because you're going along for this ride and you're almost invested in these characters, and
yeah.
you don't know how it's going to go, and there's a community involved. It's not just you and the television. So I don't know if that's something to do with it, but all those things you mentioned have definitely been a big push towards that.
Yeah, and who knows? We'll see. Like, I think they're working on a. They are working on a movie, but I think they're also working on a TV show.
Yeah, and isn't there a new game coming out as well? Like
Dark Alliances
uh
or something. Yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot happening, I guess. I think
Hey,
some of that movie's being shot here, actually, out of all places,
uh,
because we have the big set from a lot of Game of Thrones was shot here,
okay.
just up the coast. So I think because there's been a big sort of interest in
Yeah,
sort of
where is here? I
that.
don't want to assume.
Oh, sorry, Northern Ireland. Well,
Yeah,
we
I'm
call
pretty.
it.
I'm pretty sure you're from Ireland, but like I don't. I
Yeah.
didn't actually know.
Sorry. I'm one of my co-hosts on a podcast,
Hmm.
a fellow author friend, and she for a long time she thought I was in Scotland just because I assumed she knew where I was from.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And she kept saying, "Oh, Paddy, I can't wait to go over to Scotland and I'll meet you." And I kept thinking, "What is she talking about?" And then I realized, "Oh yeah, sorry."
They were going to be looking for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brian in the chat had a question. Do any
mhm.
of these cool magic items require downtime activity or anything to unlock them? Looking to give my group a long-term magic item.
So long-term magic items is that's an interesting question. Thank you, Brian. There are maybe a few things there that spring to mind. So we have magic item sets. So we based one on Lady Justice, right? So the blindfold, the scales, the
Mm.
the robes, and the sword. And essentially you do get a small boon from having each individual item, but you gain a greater benefit by having the whole set. Another one would be there's a armor of Oldenheim, which is you can go around collecting little orbs that fit into the recesses in this armor, kind of like leveling it up each time. Um, but in terms of there are items that we've included some mechanics, and this is obviously down to the DM or the GM and what they want to do. But things that people can't detect everything that item does, and they might learn parts of that later on down the line. We've included that in the lore as well. The makers, Markovad, the maker, and Eisendor the collector, they added certain things to these items to try and hide them from people and keep them safe and things like that. And then we have other ones that kind of ascend, items that level up with you. I know that's a fairly common mechanic, so it's something that we want to encourage people to do. Maybe not spend downtime with the item, although it could be that it's more kind of try and make it part of your character's backstory and get them to do something epic in line with their traits or strengths or overcoming their weaknesses, and maybe something in line with what the item wants or how that's aligned. And if that happens, then it's like, yeah, level that item up, give the reward that character with something awesome.
So I have two thoughts. One is, the idea that the armor that gets more powerful as you bedazzle it more, essentially, uh, and the collection of items that work together. Now I kind of want to do that, but they have to be like spread out throughout the party. Like you can't just put them all on one person,
Yeah,
and make it kind of like a group collection.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Doing that's there are items in there that can be collected by the party. Um, they're kind of more, I guess, the way we tried to balance that was just creating a set of items that don't all that one class wouldn't be proficient with,
Yeah,
right? So they do need to work as a party to make that collection work. But then there are other ones like the Daggers of Five Souls. So it's essentially five daggers that were created to bind the soul of a powerful entity, and it was split into five and then given to different people to care for. And if they're all brought together, you gain a benefit, but also there's this dark side to it because this entity will try to escape and things like that. So that is just something an individual would do, because they're all related closely. But most of the items, I think the sets, we we have kind of designed around individual
yeah. No, I
players.
assumed as
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
It just made me think. Well, it would be kind of cool because I don't think I've seen it where
No,
you
yeah,
could have
yeah.
you have a set, but as opposed to like one person assembling the set, the party assembles the set.
Yeah, that's really cool. We do have like the baubles of versatility, which are they come in a set and can be used by different classes. They're very specific. So it could be
Mhm.
that they, do that. But no, I like what you're saying. Outside of that, there are maybe one or two other sets, but nothing that kind of encourages them specifically to do it that way, which is, yeah, it'd be really awesome.
So, what is one of the instances of the magic items that you made that comes directly from your game? I know you mentioned the bottle of gin, which that's fantastic that they tried to drink it. Also, I kind of want to introduce that into my game, but then like it literally have the word gin crossed out and the word gin rewritten
Yeah.
underneath it, like someone was correcting the spelling on the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, oh, there's so many of them. So we have something called Oranthal's arrows, which are essentially arrows that pretty much do anything you can imagine an arrow will do. It's a collection of so this maker called Oranthal was like a ranger and wanted to make arrows do magical things. So we have like our arrows that do elemental damage, for example, the usual fire, ice, lightning, whatever damage. But also like if you roll on 20, there's a little bit of an additional mechanic in there where,
Yeah,
let's say it's I think it's Arnthal's arrow of cracked lightning, I think is the lightning one. And once that, if you hit someone with a not 20 with that, not only does it do the additional lightning damage and the piercing damage, of course, it also paralyzes them until I think it's the beginning of their next turn. I'll have to look it up, but little things like that as well. I've used those in my games. The one that came out of my games, which everyone seems to be everyone's favorite, is a barrel of monkeys. So essentially, it's a little barrel. You open the lid and
yeah.
you summon monkeys, 1d8 or 1d10 monkeys, and those monkeys kind of like go and harass whoever you want them to harass, and then that gives them a penalty depending on how many there are, whenever someone tries to attack that person. But if you roll really low, they might harass you instead.
Oh, nice.
So
I like that idea. As soon as you mentioned that, I was like, oh, that would be a cool magic item that you could attune to or not attune to. But if you don't attune to it, they harass whoever.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, monkeys, monkey paw. Yeah, that sort of makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
At first, I thought you were saying auras, not arrows.
well, Arrow, sorry, that's the old Irish accent coming out there.
Yeah, no worries. I'm from New Jersey, and there's a lot of words that like my American friends will make fun of me for saying when I say them, and they're like, "What are you talking about? What is water?" and
Yeah.
so we get I get a bit of that myself. Um, so you're on a little bit of a hiatus from gaming now. Is it always D&D games, or you play other stuff as well?
Yeah, I've this year, and toward the end of last year, I've had the pleasure to play in a few other games. I before lockdown and quarantine and all that stuff, I was playing the One Ring, and that was a great game. I really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to the next edition. Um, it's nice to see they kept some of the mechanics that I really liked, or the interviews I've seen. That's what they've said. But lately, I've played the Monsters Are Our Heroes. Have you heard of that one?
No.
Um, that's a good one. So it's like based on the classic monsters, but those are what you play: the werewolf, vampire, mummy,
Okay.
Frankenstein, that kind of thing, and you kind of have to go save the world, right? So um, that's been a lot of fun. Pew Pew, which is based on a similar system, but it's like a sci-fi type thing. Some slightly obscure ones that
Yep.
maybe people. It's I've started playing with this team, not team, but group of people every Monday. That a fellow gamer has introduced me to, and they just randomly pick, a strange or maybe a lesser known system every few weeks, and we just jump on and have a blast playing it.
No, I love that. Like our like kind of like our home group. The way we've been doing it is like it's they're monthly games, and we just rotate out like kind of the group and the game. So like me and Ted will each run a D&D game, and then we'll like bring someone else in to run like a different game. Like we had just finished up the Expanse. Now I'm running Monster of the Week.
Mhm.
Just as a way to kind of like sample and get a taste of other games that are out there. So I like
Yeah,
that idea of short runs of games, and then like mixing up what you're playing.
yeah. I saw your video on Monsters of the Week, and I thought need to give that one a shot next.
Yeah, it's I mean it's a lot of fun. It is the first um powered by the apocalypse game I've played.
Hmm.
And I like it. I like the fact that it's like, D&D is all about kind of like absolutes.
Hmm.
For the most part, like you either do the thing or you don't.
Yeah.
Where I love the concept of one, gaining experience point when you fail at doing something.
Hmm.
Two, being able to actually, success, but have some kind of, consequence to your success.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that stuff is far more interesting and rewarding, for
Yeah.
RPGs.
Just don't use your luck point unless you really need it.
Yeah, yeah, that was the takeaway.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
so I played in like it was supposed to be a one shot, and it ended up being like a two or three shot, and we were giving a reduced luck because of
right.
that, so that like to make the stakes higher. And I did, and I ended up using it, and like when we the rules are a little bit vague about when you spend all of your luck, but like everyone I've talked to, they kind of interpret it the same way as like once you're done with your luck, like it's the keeper's job then to murder you, more or less. And like at the end of that game, I was playing a werewolf, and someone else was playing like a Knights Templar kind of character. And so at the end of the game, the last scene was them getting a call from their order going, "Hey, we know you're working with this creature. You have to do something about that." So we end it with me and that character going off, leaving the rest of the group to get for me to probably either eat his face or get old Yellard. So one way
Yeah.
or another.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Also, like I kind of like games like that, but as long as like the players go in knowing that
Hmm.
it can be kind of fatal, I think they're
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
okay with it. Unlike when
Yeah.
if you're playing a D&D style game and then all of a sudden you're just dead.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, I know there's a bit of, I don't know if controversy is the right word, but I know in some groups, if you mention stuff about killing players or, dying in Dungeons and Dragons, there's certain part of the community doesn't like that.
No.
But like my first character was a half orc eldritch knight, and she died quite suddenly and unexpectedly.
Yeah.
She was fighting a bunch of giants with the party, and then she kind of helped the party get away by holding the giants back, and she died, and it really did hurt me like when it happened.
Yeah.
Um, like, not to get too personal, but it cut deep. And I think it took me like a few weeks to recover from it. Like, I was mourning for the loss of this character. And I don't know if it was just because that was my first character. Ever since then, it hasn't been quite as quite the same. But to me, that really added a whole new element to the game,
Uh-huh.
and it was like I enjoyed it so much more knowing there was this risk of this thing that I've invested so much time and energy and soul into, and it can just be snatched away from me. So yeah, that's each table and group to their own, but I like the threat of death within reason. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean our group is the same way. We had our first death in 5e fairly early. Um and I mean but there hasn't been very many. But early on it was like we were playing, we only had the player's handbook at the time. The other books weren't out yet. And like the GM was kind of like, this looks about right. And then us as players not knowing certain things, like the character went down and they failed a death save, and then one of the other players tried doing a medicine check. We didn't have a healer, we didn't have a medicine kit, or a healer's kit, and their next roll was a 1. And
Yeah.
then and we're like, yeah, and the player's like, oh, I rolled a 1, and the DM's like, well, you're dead. So but like our table tends to be a bunch of older gamers for the most part,
Mm,
so it's like in the early days that was pretty normal.
that's just what
uh
happened. Yeah.
yeah, so also too, like there's like I know like there's the group that like they don't think characters should die, and then
Hmm.
there's the group that like if your characters die it should always narratively mean something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't agree with either. I'm just like,
No.
because life isn't really like that, right? Sometimes life is just messy and things happen
Yeah.
for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true. I mean, I played with uh, Jim Ward a few months back, one
Okay.
of his groups. So I think they play every Friday. It's just a bunch of author friends started playing with him, and they invited me along as a guest once, or twice. And yeah, he can be pretty brutal because of this. It is it's a bit of a mix between 1E and AD&D, I think, or 1E and 2E. And it's just it's a different game, really, And going into it, it's handy to know
Yeah.
that because.
Well, the earlier editions, like 1E and 2E,
Mhm,
were really designed to test the players. The
mhm.
editions after that are designed to test the characters.
Yeah, yeah, this is
So
true.
it's a really different game. I was I was at D&D in a castle in the before times, and it just so happened that like I didn't have a game to run, and Stefan Picorni was running one of his games. He's got like this huge like castle dwarven forge set up, and it's like his version. It's kind of like his version of 1E.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun to kind of like step back in that for a bit, and also like I was so happy because someone either had the spell or had a magic item where they could cast lightning bolt from it. And I don't know why it's a stupid little thing that I miss from earlier editions, but when you strike a surface with lightning bolt, it bounces and continues for the rest of its range. And so it hit the monsters, hit the wall, then bounced and hit the monsters again, but then also hit a bunch of the players and stopped right in front of the person that actually cast it, and it it killed the players as well.
No, that's a lot of fun right there.
Yeah, it
That's
brings
just
back
yeah.
memories. I remember playing in the early days where the wizard would like cast lightning bolt, and then they're trying to figure out trigonometry to in order to get maximize and use the most out of their lightning bolt, so they could bounce it and ricochet.
Yeah, starting to develop programs and apps just to work out where it's going.
Yeah, where your lightning bolt goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was kind of fun. What edition of the game did you start with, or when did you start playing?
I started with 5e actually.
Okay.
So I'm a relative noob, if you want to call it that. Um, the reason being, I was what must have been in my teens when I was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. And I can't remember what edition it was, but I had the opportunity to observe a game.
Yeah,
A bit too young, maybe 12 or 13 to play with those players because they were a bit older than me. But it as soon as I saw it, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I was
yeah.
like, this is for me.
What year was that?
Oh, it must have been in the 90s, late 90s, I would say. Um, but it, I came from quite a conservative family,
Yeah,
and we had the whole satanic panic thing happening. So I was very, say, in no uncertain terms, told that I could not play Dungeons and Dragons, and I kind of got around my, satisfying that hunger for fantasy and role playing by sneaking games like Final
yeah.
Fantasy into the house and playing them in the dark in the early hours of the morning on my PlayStation, or some of the older versions of Final Fantasy as well.
It would have had to
Or
been first or second edition
maybe it could have been,
for
yeah,
Beck
yeah.
me, because third was not out yet.
Okay, okay, yeah. So yeah, I vaguely remember seeing some of the books they had, and it, I think second edition, it was likely second edition, because after I played that game with Jim Ward, I went and got a bunch of the earlier books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what brought you to the hobby now?
Um, it's a long story, but I guess the environment that I was in. Um, so here's something some people might not realize. So you think of the Satanic Panic, and you think of it being like 80s, 90s, right?
Yeah.
But people might not realize that there are still groups, let's call it that, the Satanic Panic is still a thing.
Yep.
Um,
Hey, there's still
and
groups that think the planet's flat, so
yeah, exactly. And I was a member of one such group for a long time. I was even a minister for one such group for a
Mm,
while, and so it was like Dungeons and Dragons was always off the table. But eventually, I kind of distanced myself from that environment, and it was quite difficult because there was a huge change, and it yeah, it was, it tested our family quite a lot, and that's when I kind of found Dungeons and Dragons, and it actually helped me cope quite a bit with what was going on.
okay.
A lot of tension between myself and other family members, and it all resolved itself later on down the line. But there was like a question over, am I going to lose my family over this? Because essentially we were escaping a cult, um, and we lost all of our support network, and we have family members now who don't speak to us anymore, and our kids don't know
Okay.
half of their family, and will never know half their family because they don't want to have anything to do with us.
I'm glad
So
you said it because I wasn't sure if I wanted to ask her the question or not. Like that might be insensitive.
no, not at all. I mean, I'm just mindful of maybe other people having gone through
Uh-huh.
similar things, and I don't want to be bringing anything up for them. But I don't. I'm very open about these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think yeah, D&D became a huge part of me coping with that, and just meeting new people and coming to terms with things. And I think looking back on, I realize, how I know it's like most people play it for fun, but it's actually really powerful as you know a tool for helping you learn social things or get overcoming a bit of social anxiety, and things like that. So
I've had at least, I think at this point, at least three people on the channel that have talked about games therapy, that are
mm,
professionals,
right, yeah.
and they're using it clinically,
Mhm.
um, in treatments and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of like it is great therapy in that sense, and just like it's cathartic, and you get to work things out, just from just regular gaming standpoint. I mean, I have a buddy that would regularly call me if he had a bad week at work and be like, "Hey, are we playing? I want to kill some shit this weekend."
Yeah,
And like that was an outlet for him.
yeah,
So and now here we are 20 years later, and like people in the in the mental health field are using games in order to help people work through that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I'm hearing more and more about that, and I'm really glad to see it happening because I don't know, as one of the writers we were working with earlier on, he also did, I think his PhD paper was on how it helps children with autism.
Mm,
And he was doing a lot of research in that field. And it's like, to me, it's almost like you were talking about, the proselytization aspect of
yeah.
it, because it's just awesome. And you can't describe, you can't put into words, into sufficient words, the experience of playing an awesome game of Dungeons and Dragons. Like that time when you come away from the table and you, it was 4 hours long or whatever, but it felt like 4 seconds. And you're just like, wow, that was really good. And it's like you do want to share it with people, but I also want to share it. Like, I want to see, I don't know, it's like, I'd love to see maybe younger people, teenagers, because it has so many benefits in terms of just social development, problem solving, negotiation, math skills. It's like it's almost like you could use it as an after school activity. I know that that is a thing in a lot of
Yeah.
places, but it's almost like it could be its own subject at school.
Yeah, it could be. And the thing is, like, also the people coming into the hobby are much more sophisticated than when
Mm,
I came into the hobby like 30 years ago. And they're like leaps and bounds beyond where we were. I mean, also they have all of this media to draw from and a
mm,
better understanding of different ways that the game can be played. Um, but I've, anecdotally, I've, talked to other people. Clint Black has, has Carolina tables and worked with Savage Worlds a lot. And he was telling me about a birthday party for his daughter, and all these teenagers are talking about role playing and the non-gamey aspects of D&D, and he's just kind of there, fly on the wall, and realizing how much further along these young people were as players than than he would have been when he was that age, as well as like also we've had the dungeon coach on, which has a YouTube channel, and he coaches track and field, I believe, and he runs a D&D after school program that is full of his athletes, right? Which is way different than what I remember. When I was a kid playing the game.
yeah, yeah, that probably never would have happened back then.
No, not at all. And the other thing is really cool too, is like people are jumping into the game, and really, like D&D at this point is a lifestyle brand as much as the game. Like that part
Mhm.
actually is getting bigger than the game itself. But people are jumping in and they're doing a lot more faster. Like you mentioned you're relatively new to the game, but you've already created a product. You're already creating a second product,
Hmm.
and we're getting a lot more of that, and I hear those stories more often, which only helps to expand the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, the more people that play it, the better. And the more GMs we can create, the
Yeah.
better. And the only way to do that is to create more players, because those are the people that become the GMs. Well, most of the time.
Statistically, some of them will GM. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's fantastic. And I mean, I suppose the internet has made it a huge, it's come on leaps and bounds as well in the last 10 years, and all the tools that we have on there online for learning it, and I mean, like D and Beyond for creating characters, and I mean, I've starting out that really helped me, but now I do like to try and encourage players to just do it with a character sheet and go through the book and mark up their own stats, because I feel it's like D&D Beyond is great to help you out, and even for keeping things simple later on if you need something in a
Yeah.
pinch. But if you want someone to learn it properly and understand why their character is a certain way, and get their head wrapped around the rules, I feel that if they kind of read through and mark it all up themselves, if you help them with it, obviously, it just solidifies things a lot quicker.
It is a
Um,
better way to learn than just checking some boxes.
yeah, I agree.
For sure. I mean, I've gotten really lazy and I can't do anything without D&D Beyond anymore.
Yeah, I know.
And
Yeah.
it makes it hard to play other systems. I'm like, why isn't
Mm.
there a database for this?
Yeah, why can't I just click a button?
Yeah. I
Yeah, but
mean,
yeah.
we were playing like a really custom game, and it had like, so we were all playing custom races, and we are using Roll20 to do it,
Mhm.
and like they were trying to enter the race in, and create, well, they're trying to create a character using a custom race that wasn't already entered in,
Mhm.
and in the time it took them to like do that one character, which didn't even get finished, I had put entered in like 4 or 5 custom races in D&D Beyond, and then
Yeah.
like just sent it to them, and my
Mm.
son was like able to make a character in like 3 minutes after he had spent like an hour doing all this other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
think, yeah, I think being online as well, you need to be, eh, because there is a lot of online game, and I don't think that'll ever replace, in person. There's just something about in person play
it's
that you
like
can't.
live events,
Yeah, yeah, you can't just.
like going to a concert and listening to live music doesn't sound as good as
No.
something recorded in a studio, but we
Yeah,
still want to hear the live version. We want to be there
yeah,
and like feel it.
yeah. Exactly. But like, Roll20, our usual setup is D&D Beyond 20 plugin on Chrome, and then Roll20,
Yeah.
and it just lets you roll everything across the whole that
Yeah,
whole
we've been doing the
environment.
same thing with our Saturday game. I love the Beyond 20 plugin. It keeps me
Yeah.
from having to learn anything
Yeah,
new.
same. Well, as a, you already you as a GM, you already have enough to worry about. If one less thing on your in your mind gives you a bit more freedom for running the game. So
Yeah, and it's just like kind of familiar for everybody. So,
yeah.
um, what is the gaming scene like in Ireland?
I think like everywhere else, it's kind of picking up. I mean, there, like when I started out, it was very difficult to find people to play with,
Hmm.
and then I think we quickly realized that when we got a little group together, and there were 6 of us, and our dungeon master, I mean, he's been playing since first edition, and we just realized how lucky we were very quickly. So it was like we took it really seriously, and no
Yeah.
one ever missed a session. And it was like it was just this thing that we treated with a lot of respect. I think it's because we realized we had something special, because not there were it's something very rare, or was something very rare around here, especially being such a small country. But it has picked up. I mean, I've seen groups appear on social media networks, that are for, there's a D&D Ireland now, and a bunch of local game stores are starting to sort of get more of the products in, and the universities have been really good because they've always had D&D groups and things like that, but it's becoming more prevalent.
Mhm.
And I just think that that kind of culture overall is just becoming more popular. So that it lends itself to people finding Dungeons and Dragons.
Um, so you mentioned you kind of just started with 5e. So how long have you been playing now?
About 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 5 years.
So we talked about you do some writing too.
Hmm.
You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons, like you mentioned, kind of coming in and being able to create a product fairly quickly is because I've run a publishing company for, well, I've run the company for a few years, but I've been writing and publishing my own novels since about 2016. Um, so I'm not really like I'm no stranger to the publishing scene,
Right.
but publishing novels and publishing TTRPG content, it's the same game but two completely different ballparks. So there's a lot of difference in those two spheres, but there are also a lot of similarities. So I wasn't coming into it with kind of totally green. Um, so yeah, I write science fiction novels under the pen name Killian Carter. I've got a few series up there. One I'm working on currently is Max Miller series, which is kind of like a guy traipsing around the solar system, sort of solving crimes with his dog called Cat. Um, and yeah,
That's
it's a lot.
great.
That's a lot of fun. Yeah, he's kind of like a Max is a bit. He's kind of like a hard-boiled detective, as they always are in these stories. But he's not very um, he's not the best with technology, and his dog came with this prototype canine automated translator, so CAT, and he's just called it Cat ever since because, and the dog kind of like can say one-word syllables or one-syllable words sometimes, like eat, and
So how
often
has that experience transcended over to running games as a DM?
yeah, I mean Dungeons and Dragons, I suppose, there's always been a strong element of storytelling, and that's one of the aspects I've liked to lean into the most as a DM, and even as a player, I love just seeing the backstory and other players' backstories kind of being woven into whatever campaign is being run, and to me, that's the most fulfilling part. And I think that might be because I'm really big into story structure, writing characters, character development, watching plots unfold, all that good stuff. So that's kind of like I've brought some of that over into my own DMing and writing adventures and homebrewing, and I think that's kind of helped quite a bit. I'm pretty good at world building and stuff like that because I've done it for so long.
Yeah.
I have this file on World Anvil, and I don't even know how big it is anymore. It's huge. It's just got my Galactic Sentinel series is like, what would you? It's like Mass Effect,
Okay.
in terms of scale, and like it spans the galaxy and has all these alien races and ships and planets, and it's like, okay, I need World Anvil to store all this for me because it doesn't fit in my head.
Yeah.
So it's like, and of course World Anvil was originally set up for GMing. So although they've kind of like branched more into writing recently as well. So yeah, it's a
It's
kind of a.
actually the other way around.
Is it the other way around? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Dimitri and Janet, great folks over there.
Yeah.
Um, Dimitri created and designed World Anvil to help his wife Janet finish her novels and books she was working.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um,
Like, what a jerk! You're making the rest of us, the rest of us partners out there look really bad.
yeah, I know. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, the reason I thought it was for GMing first, I suppose, because that's the first thing I saw when I first signed up years ago, and they've
Yeah, well,
recent.
they're marketing. They have marketed. They're marketing very heavily to GMs and DMs after
Yeah,
it started like catching on in the RPG space.
yeah,
Um, which I mean, I think like they saw the application for it right away,
Hmm.
It just wasn't the initial impetus, but they found that like GMs were definitely more vested in using the product
Oh yeah,
and putting
it's
their
almost
stuff
like,
over there.
yeah, it's almost, yeah. I mean, that shows you the similarities between the
Yeah.
writing and the GMing side of things, right? So I guess me being a writer and bringing that over to GMing was just, it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when.
So, are there any hangups or hitches when like you're writing games, you're writing for games now instead of for a novel, where like you create all the stuff and but now you don't have control of the characters. They can do whatever they want.
No, not really.
Like
Because I suppose,
taking a swig from the gin bottle.
yeah, I mean, I know there's like one of the complaints I've seen a lot in forums or whatever is, it's a meme, isn't it? You kind of like set a hook for your players and they go and do the complete opposite or whatever.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it, like you'd be surprised because this is going to sound weird, but when you're writing a novel, the characters aren't yours either. It's like they have their own minds and they go off and do their own thing. And when you try to force them to do something, like to go down the plot that you set out,
Mhm.
right? That's when I get writer's block, and I suspect that's probably when a lot of people get writer's block. But when you kind of like your character decides, I want to go do that, and you go with it, and you keep going and just encourage that character to keep doing it. And this sounds silly because this character's in your head, right? But it's like it is like almost a separate persona because you're
Yeah.
projecting that onto a page. And if you follow that, they always like 10 times out of 10, they always do something 10 times better than you could have ever imagined, even though you are the one imagining it. That's
Yeah, it's a matter of seeing the world through that character's lens, right?
yeah,
Which,
yeah.
which in theory thinks about things differently than you would if the character is vastly different than you.
Yeah, because essentially you as a person are a character, right? But you're creating separate entities from you on a piece of paper, and it's the same. I see that in D&D. You could try and force your players into doing something, and you might think it's awesome. I spent so long creating this part of the world and this awesome plot hook and this great BBEG, and then they go and do this thing, and you can get upset about that, or you can run with it and realize that, oh wow, that's 10 times better than the thing I was going to get them to do.
Yeah. One of my favorite memes is like it's like I guess it's supposed to be like a Reddit conversation or something. But it's like, someone's like, I want to play D&D, but I want to play all the characters and be the dungeon master. And then
Yeah,
someone responds, it's like, that's called writing a book.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do see GMs
Yeah.
getting very caught up in wanting things to happen a specific way because that's the way they designed them. And I think people like that are people who maybe should have written a book and haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. So your writing is primarily sci-fi. Um, so do elements of that creep into your D&D games?
Not so much just because the genre is so widely different.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not, you can't really translate a whole lot from science fiction into a fantasy setting. I suppose that you can, but it's not my style. Um, but I do have some fantasy novels in the works, and they're actually based on or inspired by games that I've run or adventure and setting books that I have planned for the future. So they're kind of going to tie together. Um,
Has playing D&D may kind of push you in a direction of fantasy?
no, I've wanted to write fantasy my entire life. Like my so my dad got out of prison when I was about 8 years old, and he would kind of like leave fantasy novels lying around, Tolkien, Hobbes, Robert Jordan, Robin E. Feist, all those people, David Gemmell, and I'd pick them up and read them, when he wasn't reading them, and I just got completely absorbed in and fell in love with fantasy. And I always loved fantasy as a younger kid watching
Yeah.
cartoons and stuff, but it was like I was like, I want to write like this when I get older. And the reason I started in science fiction was because I thought I'm not qualified to write fantasy. And then I realized that science fiction wasn't any easier.
Like, oh, I'm not qualified to write this either.
Yeah, exactly. So after learning over years to write
Yeah,
science fiction, I was like, okay, well maybe I should just do fantasy. But and now that I'm doing D&D, it just makes sense to branch into it. So
yeah. Why? Yeah, why not? And then
yeah.
now you can kind of tie the things together if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do that because I've got all these things, all these plans. Who knows how many of them will come to fruition? You know, we only
Yeah,
have so many years in our lives, but yeah, I've got a lot of exciting things I want to do at some point in the near future. We'll see.
nice. Um, have you well, you said you did explore some other RPGs where they were, science fiction
Hmm.
as well. Because, matter of fact, also like they're obscure games too, like that you mentioned, which I kind of like that. Like,
Yeah,
hearing about new things.
yeah. I mean, I have to thank my friends on the Banff podcast who sort of like invite me on to play with them and things because I wouldn't, I wouldn't really know a lot of these things if they hadn't pointed them out or, recommended them as a game to play on Monday. And yeah, it's just it's getting to see all those games out there and some of the awesome things creators are putting together. It's a lot of fun.
And they're all authors.
They aren't. Some of them are.
Okay.
Most of them are game designers and make their own indie games. And I'm fairly, they've been going a while now. I've only recently joined their games about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, they're a great bunch of guys over there.
And you said you guys kind of like rotate in and out. Do you DM for them at all, or you just
I
like?
haven't yet, but only because I haven't offered. Again,
Yeah.
like I still feel like a bit of an imposter, if you know what I mean.
Well, that was my next question. Is that it? With that, does that feel intimidating?
It does, yeah, because some of these people have been playing for, like yourself for such a long time, and it's like I feel like, like the science fiction thing, and again, I feel unqualified. It's who am I, this squire, to run a game for these knights or whatever.
Well, I will say just because someone's done something for a long time doesn't automatically mean they're good at it. So, and,
Yeah, this is true.
and sometimes people just come in and like their lack of knowing is sometimes a strength, right? Like they're gonna do things different, and
Mm,
like it's one of the reasons why I love new players, because like they don't have the baggage of old players. They don't
yeah,
have preconceived notions necessarily. Um, they're just gonna show up and try and do crazy things.
yeah, they're not set in their ways or,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, makes sense.
So I'm gonna take a question from the chat from Brian. Any interesting sentient cursed items that might make sense in a steampunk Eberron setting?
Ooh, that's a good question. Again, Brian, thank you. He's laying on the difficult ones.
He's here usually every day and usually has some good questions.
Yeah, I love questions like that. So there are there are there's a nice selection of sentient items. Um, so part of the lore is that I don't want to give too much away, but there's a character called Markovad the Maker, who essentially was Isendor's master and the person responsible for most of the magic items in the vault. And the gods um, wanted, good was Markovad's, let's say, craft that the gods craved it for themselves. So they caused her to ascend, and in doing so, they caused this thing called the Flash. And Isendor was just returning from getting some supplies when this happened, and the Flash caused like a bit of a tear in the multiverse or the realms or whatever you want to call it, and it sucked in entities and souls and even some living people into some of these items and caused this weird chaos. And so you have a lot of these items that have an entity, and these entities want different things. Whether they would fit into like a steampunk setting like Eberron, I guess you could you could make them work. Yeah, I mean, I'll say that none have been specifically created for that kind of setting. Um, but there are one or two that could probably fit there nicely. That has maybe a bit more of a, I don't know, a sort of like 1800s industrial feel to them. Um,
Like kind of like a gaslight.
yeah, yeah, I've got a little bit of that. Like even the designs and some of the armor,
Mhm.
it's kind of got the cogs. So in our magazine we have a guy called Giz Cogs Wandering Emporium. It's a little gnome, and he's an artificer, and he creates little clockwork gnomes and like steam powered things. And he has a little let's say a wagon full of magical trinkets, and it's pulled by a pig, and he sort of like holds a carrot ahead of the pig, so the pig's
Yeah.
always trying to get the carrot. But like the whole idea is he can appear anywhere at any time, in a prison cell with you. It's like, where did this guy come from? Or on the peak of a mountain where there is no one. And he's in every issue of Mag of Holding, kind of displaying his new
Right.
magic items. But so he's also tied into the setting and some of the items in the book. So there's this clockwork element to some of the items. So in short, we haven't designed any items as such, but some of them could be used, I suppose.
Yeah, the clockwork stuff works really well, and
Yeah,
also like Everon specifically is very magical, so it's really easy to put anything in there.
true.
Steampunk maybe a little bit more challenging, but you could also it's also really easy just to like give things a bit of a facelift and change the way they look a little bit to make them more steampunky and
Yeah,
incorporate them.
yeah. That's one of the things we're trying to encourage as well with the book. It's we have a few paragraphs on this. It's no one's going to use all of the magic items in any magic item book, but there are some pretty cool ideas in there, and we hope they'll inspire other DMs to maybe go and create their own magic item that they can use in their own setting.
Yeah, and I think we just like reading magic items too,
Yeah,
as
it's just
nerds.
yeah, it's just fun reading about these things. Yeah.
So, as always, folks, there are links in the description. Click away. Follow Penny Dragon Games. And with that, any final words before we head on out?
For myself,
Yep.
not really. Just thanks very much for having me. Penny Dragon Games, like our mission is to try and get you know, it's Dungeons and Dragons is becoming very, very popular. There's no denying that, but it's trying to get it to other people, even people who might not have an opportunity. I kind of feel like I missed out as a kid in playing it, and I would hate to see that to happen to other children and teenagers. So part of what we're trying to do is to help other younger people play the game, and that we're going to do that off the back of all these other things we're doing. So thanks very much for the opportunity and for letting me come on and talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on and chatting. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.